Hello! Okay, so I'm back. I wrote down all my notes on this kind of paper. I might actually shoot like multiple videos. Maybe I'll actually take off my purple shirt because I only have it on because I'm cold. I like to do some mental health related videos right now, and I'm probably gonna, okay, trying to figure out what to do. I have symptoms of OCD, warning signs of suicide, and symptoms of depression. So I'm going to tackle each one individually, and then I'll probably make a playlist of them. So, anywho, that kind of intro out of the way, I will say that, disclaimer, I am not a professional in any way, shape, or form. I am only an expert in my own experiences, and that's actually what I'm going to read out all the symptoms and such, and warning signs, whatever, for each individual condition or sort of like side effect of mental illness. I said the word mental illness. I like the word mental health conditions better, but I'm just gonna read out what I found online and relate to it. So that's how it's gonna do it. I'm not like gonna talk about like pure information of like what is depression, what is OCD, that kind of thing, because I don't have time for that. And basically other people have said it before me and have said it much more eloquently than what I'm going to talk about, so I'm not really interested in that part. So if you're here for that, you can go forth and research that on your own and then come back to this video when you want to hear one particular person's like perspective, interpretation, experiences with that condition or sort of side effect in a sense. Okay. If you don't know, OCD is called OCD because it stands for obsessive compulsive disorder. And are something that you do to relieve the anxiety, because you'll have an intrusive thought. You get like the intrusive thought, and then there's the anxiety or distress that comes with it, because it's not always just anxiety. You get the level of distress, so then you do the compulsion to counteract that anxiety, but that just reinforces the obsessive thought. So then you'll have more of the obsessive thoughts, and then you'll keep doing more compulsions and then have more obsessive thoughts, and that kind of thing. That's how that works. I'm going to start with symptoms of OCD, but some of the obsessions of OCD, the thoughts, I'm going to read off this list and then kind of go back into my own experiences. So some of the obsessions tend to be fear of contamination or germs. I don't have any of this. Fear of losing control, harming self or others. That is the OCD that I live with. Intrusive thoughts of sexual or violent nature. Excessive focus on religious or morality, also called scrupulosity, which I do not have. Fear of losing, not having things you might need, like a little bit, but not like a lot. Order and symmetry for just right, none of that. Superstitions, none of that. Compulsions, so these are behaviors that are visible or covert, that you engage in to release anxiety or distress. So excessive double checking. I would check memories. That's the kind of checking that I did. Repeated checking in on loved ones for safety. I have is counting, tapping, repeating certain words. When I was first diagnosed, I did this thing where I would go like that with my neck, because I always hear the intrusive thoughts on this side of my head and not really on that side. I don't know why. But I'd have a kill yourself thought, and then I'd go like that to like counteract what I heard, in a sense. They're not actual voices or anything, but yeah, that was one that I had. I'd also kind of repeat certain things, I think, to myself. That happened a bit. Spending a lot of time washing or cleaning, don't do that. Order arranging just so, don't do that. Praying excessively, nope. Accumulating junk, nope. So that's all of like the OCD symptoms. Yeah. I was diagnosed back with OCD in fall 2014. So it's been almost 4 years, right? Yeah, almost 4 years soon. I had symptoms of OCD when I was 19, when I started college, but it wasn't like diagnosable until I was a couple years older, when I was 21. I'm 24 now. 2015 in the fall, I went to the OCD Institute, which is just like treatment for OCD, which is essentially therapy and mindfulness and things to that effect, and meds if necessary, which is probably most of the time. I had an OCD therapist for a year that I saw twice a week, and then I went to the OCDI for 5 weeks, which was not a locked unit, which was very strange as someone who's been on a locked unit most of the time. I would say mid-2016 it disappeared. Like, it, poof, gone. I really thought, like, this year, and in 2017, I thought that I didn't live with OCD anymore. But I don't quite think that's true. I think it's still there, it's just nothing to what it used to be. Because I still get intrusive thoughts, and so there's that. I lived with obsessive compulsive disorder on self-harm and suicide obsessions. I always joke that they're the fun kind. My experience with OCD is that I'll have an intrusive thought, and my experiences with it were intrusive thoughts. I had a lot of mental compulsions as well, because I'd have, for me it was self-harm and suicide, so I would have an intrusive thought, oh hey, I should go kill myself, and then I legit had the phrase kill yourself as my, like, intrusive thought a lot of the time, which is why I'm very, like, that phrase means nothing to me. So if YouTube, if I ever get hate comments and people tell me to go kill myself, I'm not going to be very affected by that, because I've been hearing that in my head for like 4 years. So I'd have the big thing with Harm OCD, which is essentially what I had focused Harm OCD on myself. So I had the self-harm suicide stuff, but and this is a huge but I did not want to act on it. That's the difference of like Harm OCD from like genuine suicidal ideation. Like, it wasn't something that I wanted to actually go do. Kind of. But yeah, so for me, ultimately, I would have a thought that said, kill yourself, and then I would get anxious, and I'd be like, oh my god, does that mean I actually want to kill myself? Like, I don't want to kill myself, yes I do, no I don't, yes I do, no I don't. And then I would go into compulsions of a lot of mental rituals, because they can be physical, overt, or covert mental. So I'd have a lot of, like, reassurance seeking. I did that a lot. There were a few times that I went to the counseling center at my university and was like, I'm gonna kill myself, and they were like, why, what are you thinking? And then we just talked about it, and it would be like, oh, it's just OCD. And it's like, oh, great, you got tricked again. That was what the anxiety was. I was afraid I would lose control of myself and then wind up hurting myself, despite the fact that I didn't want to do that. I was afraid that, I was, driving along down the road, and then I have a thought, go jump into a tree, or something like that, hang myself off a tree, that kind of thing. I will put a trigger warning on this as well, unfortunately, which is the really shit thing. It was something I went to do, but that's just a whole other level of fucked up, which I'll get into. Then The big thing with Harm OCD is that at the time when I was for the 3 months that I lived with OCD, I didn't have, well, I started to get symptoms of depression. And a lot of the time, anxiety and depression tend to go hand in hand, particularly with OCD as well. So what happened with me was, like, I wound up developing depression. And there's a really, really great diagram, and if I can find it online, I will insert it here. Because there is such thing as living with OCD, with, like, self-harm and suicide obsessions, like, actual obsessions. And then also, like, there's, like, 4 stages, I think. You can only live with OCD and have self-harm and suicide obsessions. The second one is, like, living with OCD. Living with depression and having genuine suicidal ideation. Then it's, like, living with OCD, and some of them are, like, OCD-based, in a sense. Like, they're just intrusive thoughts, and some of them are genuine suicidal thoughts. And then there's, like, the last category where it's, like, all of it is just, like, depression-based more so. That's very complicated, but if I can find the diagram, it'll make hopefully a lot more sense. I wound up developing the case where I had suicidal self-harm obsessions, which didn't mean I wanted to kill myself. I didn't want to kill myself. I was actually afraid that having the intrusive thought meant that I wanted to kill myself, even though I didn't want to kill myself. It's weird now, especially with depression, because I don't have a fear of it anymore. Maybe I'll just have this as one video, because I think it would make a lot more sense if it's just one video versus, like, splitting it up into multiple parts, because it's so like, intricately, like, put together, you know, like, it's hard for me to separate it out and be like, okay, this is one box, this is another box. It's not that neat. It's very scrunched up, very messy. But the problem I found that I wound up having with the fear of losing control of myself or that I would hurt myself or other people, not that I had the other people one, but, is the word fear. Like, I definitely did at the beginning of the OCD, but when I got depression, the whole game changed, because, I just didn't, I mean, I was still afraid in a way, but, like, it didn't stop me anymore. Like, there was one time I stayed 45 minutes in a stairwell because I was afraid I was going to push myself down the stairs, which I don't know how that would work, but you get the idea. So I stayed there for 45 minutes because I couldn't move, which was a pretty low point, one of my low points. When I lived with OCD for those 3 months that I did, and it was purely OCD, it was pure obsessional OCD, pure O. Oh shit. I would spend hours of my time just going through obsessive thoughts and intrusive thoughts and, like, doing mental compulsions. Like, I would I would have a kill yourself thought, and then I would go, like, oh crap, does that actually mean I want to? No, I don't. Yes, I do. Maybe I do. I don't know. Let me check. And then I would go through my memories and check to see if there's any evidence that I had any inkling towards suicide. And then I'd be like, okay, good, I'm not going to kill myself, that's good. And then pause, and then it would be kill yourself again, and then I'd go through the whole thing again, and it was just like I would spend hours, like 4 hours, 5 hours at a time doing that. I started dreaming a lot about it as well, which is something that I still get occasionally. I'd have dreams where I would kill myself or self-harm, which are always, like, unsettling, essentially. I would actually, at first I didn't have dreams where I would kill myself, but I would have dreams of me sitting in my room, obsessing and doing compulsions, which was, like, terrible. So it was not only the fact that I was doing it in real life, but I was also going to sleep at night and dreaming about it. I don't think I got much sleep either during that time. And then I did a lot of reassurance seeking. When the diagnosis was mentioned to me, I actually went online and looked it up, and because I was like, no way, me? No, I don't live with OCD. And then I looked it up online and I found Harm OCD stuff, and I was like, oh yeah, that's me. I've definitely had identity problems with OCD as well, which you can find an article that I read out loud called OCD and Identity, if you're interested in that. Definitely had, like, in 2017 now, I have intrusive thoughts where, like, they're, like, really detailed, too. Like, they're, like, there was one time I came home and, like, my dad had been out for a while or whatever, and I was like, oh my god, someone broke into the house, like a serial killer broke into the house, killed him, chopped him up into pieces, and put him in the woods outside. And I was like, that's really specific. I've also had ones about, like, oh, someone, a friend of mine isn't around, that means they, got chopped up and sent on, like, little body parts of, like, all, like, along the, like, ramp of, like, a highway kind of thing. Like, weird stuff. I also have ones about Mocha, like someone breaking into the house and shooting Mocha, which is my dog. So, really specific. I suppose I could say, the reassurance seeking is two things rather. Reassurance seeking for me was like, I would actually call hotlines. I would call suicide hotlines and be like, there's one time I was working at an ice cream place, and it was my first job, and I pulled over in, like, a parking lot, and I think it was the same, I don't know if it was the same time or not, but I pulled over into a parking lot and I called the suicide hotline because I was like, I had the intrusive thought that I was going to drive my car into a tree and die. And so I was like, I was crying and everything, and I was, like, really upset, and I was like, I think I'm gonna kill myself because I was just having these thoughts about killing myself, and even though I didn't want to act on them, like, they would still show up and stuff, and, like, I remember just calling hotlines and things like that, and, like, them being confused, a little bit confused, like, me being like, oh, I live with OCD and stuff like that, and I have this thing, because there's no OCD hotline, which makes sense, because, one of the, some other things I used to do, I was actually I was president of the photo club at school, photography club, for a few years, and when I got diagnosed, yeah, but I was president of the photo club, and I stopped going to meetings, and, like, because I lost, well, this goes into depression, but I lost interest in stuff, and I remember there was one night, this is definitely going to have a trigger warning on it, and that's the kind of shitty thing, but there was one time that I got an email from a photo club member, and they were, like, understandably pissed off, because I, like, didn't go to any meetings, didn't email anyone, didn't do anything about that for, like, legit a month, and they wrote me, like, an angry email in the sense of, like, being like, oh, well, if you're not going to show up, at least respect the fact that we have other things to do, sometimes we're only coming in for this one thing, like, it shows, like, a lack of integrity, and, like, things to that effect, and I was eating dinner, actually in this room, and I got as far as picking up the knife that I was eating with, and rolling up my sleeve, and I was just about to cut myself, when I was like, wait, I'm not just about to cut myself because of something someone said. Like, no. Put the line here. There's also, like, because going up to school, I don't live at school or anything, so I have to take the train, so I would always be around trains and stuff, and I would be like, I would see I'd have, intrusive thoughts are not just thoughts themselves. They can be images, words, phrases, things like that. So I would always have like an intrusive image of me jumping in front of a train and dying. And I would sort of, I made this like virtual line in my head, and I'm like, don't cross the line. Like, I'd always back up. Like, if I was standing too close to the edge of the road, in a sense, I'd make sure I back up, because I would essentially take preventative measures to make sure I didn't accidentally, on purpose, hurt myself, kind of thing, because that's what I was afraid of. The fear was that I was going to act on it even though I didn't want to. This is also the time that I started self-harming. The complicated thought process in that was like, and like I knew what self-harm was too, like I couldn't, there's no way I could say like, oh, I didn't know what I was doing. Like, no, like I knew what I was doing. I knew about self-harm, I learned about it far before that. And but like, I think self-harm started as like a self-punishment kind of thing. Like I shouldn't be having these thoughts. Shoulds are filled with judgment. I don't like shoulds. But I shouldn't have these thoughts, and like, I should punish myself for having them, in a sense. Or like, oh, I did too many convulsions, I should just scratch my arm, kind of thing. So I just remember I like, you know, started self-harming. I started scratching to like, if I scratched myself, I felt that I would return to like this moment, this present moment, this reality, in a sense, rather than just being lost in my head. I remember staring at ceilings all the time, in my room, at school, skipping classes. Like, I would just sit there and be like, I wish I could kill myself, because but I'm so afraid that that I could, that I can't. And it was the worst, honestly. Like, OCD is not something, it's not a quirk, it's not a cute thing, it's a debilitating disorder, and it can lead to suicide. And like most other mental health conditions that are often trivialized, it is serious, and it's something we need to talk more about. And because with OCD and having the intrusive thought based on self-harm suicide is like, I've always been able to feel like either people don't understand me because I'm telling them, oh, I live with OCD on this, this, and this, and they'll be like, oh, so you're suicidal. And I'm like, no, if I was suicidal, I would have just told you that. So people don't understand in that sense. And then with depression, it's like, I'll say that I had like a suicidal thought, whatever, and then they'll be like, oh, so you are suicidal or whatever, and then I'd be like, well, no, there's OCD as well. It's like I can't win either way, and like I felt since like the beginning of like diagnosis that I get like quadruple the amount of stigma, because it's not just the OCD suicide self-harm, but it's also the depression suicide self-harm. So it's like 4 times the amount of stigma, because no. But yeah, I would say the OCD that I live with is a lot trickier, because when I say that I live with suicide obsessions, people will automatically assume that I'm confessing suicidality, which is not what I'm doing. Unless I am confessing suicidality, but that's pretty obvious when I'm doing that. So it's always like, no matter what, I will always be misunderstood, which sucks, because it's like if the OCD part of me, in a sense, like, if someone understands the depression perspective, I feel there's a part of like the OCD part where it's like, oh no, but me, I exist too. And then if it's like the OCD being like accepted and understood, then it's like the depression's like, but what the fuck, I'm right here, like, why aren't you paying attention to me? So it's like either way, I just can't win, and it sucks. About living with OCD on self-harm and suicide is because, like, I'd have to put a trigger warning, even if I'm talking about it purely OCD. Like, I'd have to put a trigger warning on it anyway because it's just a hot potato topic. Sometimes I've been jealous before of how other people with, like, maybe, like, ordering OCD or, like, you know, germ stuff, contamination stuff, like, they can talk about it without putting a fucking trigger warning on it, but I can't. And that sucks. Nobody wants to talk about suicide, and that is something that grinds my gears, honestly, because such a thing that I struggle with, now, at least. But yeah, I have to, now I think it probably would be better if I split it up. I might just continue doing it right now, like tonight, though. It's the 27th of December, so Simba, remember. Any other things? I actually have notebooks, too, of, like, during the time that I was living with OCD, when it was purely OCD. I have notebooks and stuff from that I can read out of if you're ever curious and want to learn more about it, or if I haven't explained it well enough here. Yeah, with OCD, because mine do involve, like, it's so shit. Honestly, like, it's, like, the worst ones to have. Because, like, you know, again, like, what I said in the beginning of the video, like, no one wants to talk about suicide, which is a pain in the fucking ass. And one of the reasons, in a way, that I loosely don't kill myself is because if I ever did kill myself, I'm sure no one would know it was a suicide. Because no one ever talks about it. Like, so many suicides go unnoticed because of, like, car accidents, or, you know, I don't want to mention different methods and stuff here, but, like, overdoses and, you know, things like that. Like, people are like, oh, I don't know what happened. Like, even at my school, there's been a couple suicides, and, like, people are like, oh, they just accidentally fell down, like, 3 floors. And it's like, no one just accidentally falls. Like, that person clearly jumped. Like, I don't know who the fuck you're trying to fool, because that's not how that happened. And it's just aggravating in a way, because it's like, just say the word. Say the word suicide, honestly. Because so many people live in silence about it, and those of us who struggle with it feel that we might have to be silent about it, and silence kills. Like, plainly put, silence kills. Hands down. So that's gonna be the harder video to make. It's so dark and depressing. Although depressing's not an adjective. Treatments for OCD is therapy, ERP, well, therapy, yeah, exposure response prevention, which is essentially, like, exposing yourself to the trigger, the intrusive thought, and not acting on compulsions. Good stuff. I have a very complex relationship. Let me think. When I got the diagnosis of OCD, honestly, everything, it just, like, blew the fuck up. Like, I thought in my life that I might have depression, but I never thought I had OCD. And I got in college anyway, but when I got the diagnosis of OCD, I definitely felt the self-stigma of, like, stigma is, like, judgments of yourself or others make upon you for having a certain mental health condition. It's often mental health. I would have self-stigma about, like, how did I not know? How could I not know that I was living with a condition? And that kind of thing. So that was... Getting diagnosed, I think, really blew it up. Like, because I didn't have a name to it, and I didn't know what I was experiencing was something that other people experienced, and, like, I wasn't alone in that fact. Self-stigma, like, I had a lot, I remember a few times when I was in the shower, and I would come out of the shower, and, my brain would be like, Raquel, you self-harmed. You scratched yourself last night. And I'd be like, no, I didn't. And it's like, really? Prove it. Show me your arm. Let me see it. Like, you have to look at it and visually check that you didn't do that. And I'd be like, fuck, like, I know that's a compulsion. Try not to do that. And then I would have, like, trying to figure out what I was just talking about. But I'd have, like, I'd have the self-stigma with it. I would have, thoughts that were like, oh, you know, you don't really live with OCD. Like, you don't have OCD. And I was like, yes, I do. And I was like, no, you don't. And it would always be like that. Like, it would be like an argument back and forth with OCD itself. And then, a lot of my issues, in particular, deal a lot with proving things. Having to prove to myself, and having to prove to other people. And I'll probably get more into this in another video, but I'll mention it briefly right now, because I might as well. I'm already here, I'm already saying it, so... But a lot of my issues are, like... like, so many... There's, like, so many things I want to say. Let me just write them down briefly, because otherwise I'm going to forget. It's weird. I don't even feel like I'm making a video right now. It just feels very, like, conversational and just very, like, non-video-esque. Okay, so I just wrote some stuff down. One of the big things that I've stuck around since the beginning of mental health conditions reign, I always thought that I had to prove that I was suicidal. Like, because I lived with OCD on self-harm and suicide obsessions, when I genuinely became suicidal, I thought no one would believe me. Like, no one's gonna believe me because I've said, and it's noted, it's documented that I live with OCD on this, that they're just gonna think it's OCD. So I felt that I had to prove, like, I'm really suicidal, and the only way I could prove that I was suicidal was if I acted on it, which is a very distorted thought. Yeah. I wish I could say that, like, even when I got, like, diagnosed with OCD, it was like, I want to say that I never acted on it, but that's not anywhere near the truth. Like, a compulsion of mine was to act on it, which is really fucked up, because I've so often said that it wasn't genuine suicidal ideation. It wasn't something I wanted to act on, and it wasn't even like acting on it was like, I wasn't like genuinely suicidal and acting on it. It was more like, but with the suicidality thing, it was like definitely like oh, I have to prove that I'm serious and this isn't fucking around anymore, in a sense. And, like, there were things that I did, that I acted on, that I didn't want to act on, but I acted on them because it was, like, my brain would said it. My brain said, like, oh, but if you act on it, then, like, I was no longer anxious at the thought of it, which is a huge part of the depression for me. Like, the thought of suicide wasn't enough. I had to actually go forth. I had to go further than where I was to find the anxiety that I would normally have felt before at just the thought of it. So I guess I got, like, desensitized to it. Like, I got used to it in a way, like, having kill yourself thoughts, kill yourself, kill yourself, kill yourself, kill yourself. Like, I had that all the time. And I'd fixate on it, and I think anyone would normally get depressed by that and wind up developing depression, because that just sucks. Like, honestly, it's like the worst experience you could possibly have. other than probably actually killing yourself. But like, I remember when I got depression, and I remember when it set in, because it was New Year's Eve, the night before New Year's Eve. Sorry. It was the night before New Year's Eve, and I spent like 5 hours. I tried going to sleep, and I couldn't fall asleep, and that was, not being able to fall asleep was something that only happened to me like 2 times before that. And I just remember, like, I went through every coping strategy I had. I tried so hard to make it stop, and I couldn't make it stop. And I remember going down, I remember going down to the garage, and I brought my phone with me and a razor blade. And I tried cutting myself, and it didn't work, because I didn't want to. And I just was talking to a friend, and like, I was trying to get up the nerve to call a suicide hotline, even though I felt bad because I wasn't suicidal. Even though I wanted to self-harm. And before I called, I was like, no, I should have a legitimate reason for calling. Like, I couldn't just call because, hey, I'm bored, whatever. Like, it was like, I felt like I had to actually call because I was actually going to do something, going to act on something. So I decided to try to hurt myself first, and then call. And then I decided not to call at all, because I think I called one, like, line, and it wasn't a 24/7 one, so I had gone out in the cold and it was freezing, but that didn't work. And then I went back in the garage, and I just remember going up to, you know, taking the stairs back to my room, and like, my brain telling me, like, the only thing that I could do to make it stop, to make the OCD shut up, would be as if I acted on it and if I killed myself. Like, there was nothing else I could do. Like, nothing was gonna make it stop. And it sucks because, like, I knew that if I acted on it and I wound up in the hospital, that I would just have more thoughts about hurting myself to wind up dead. So, in a sense, it was never enough for OCD. Like, OCD could take my mind and my body and my life, and it would never be enough. It's got really deep. I didn't even mean it to. Yeah, it's gonna be tricky to do these videos. I think the depression and suicidality one are gonna be harder. I'll see how I feel about it tomorrow, like later tonight, tomorrow kind of thing, because I should probably wrap up this video now, and like pause, and then like just do the other videos like tomorrow, the next day, just because I don't want to over trigger myself in a sense. But yeah, like, yeah, I think the suicide isn't just the cookie cutter, germs, contamination, counting, order. It's a lot more than that, and it can be very debilitating. And I think mine was. Yeah, that New Year's Eve, night before New Year's Eve, was very difficult. When I had the thought that nothing I would do, there was nothing I could do to make it stop, the OCD stop, that the only thing there was to do was to kill myself, I started planning suicide and decided I was going to kill myself 6 days later. But I didn't tell anyone, which I can get into later. But I think I'll end this video here. It's been real, it's been legit, and it's been emotional, which I didn't totally expect, in a way. I feel like it's kind of obvious, but, like, also not. But now you know a little bit more about me. I gotta put this one away, it's just, like, warning sign stuff for depression. But, okay, yeah, maybe I'll try to film a happier video after this one, I don't know. It's, like, almost 10 o'clock, though. I'm probably gonna do some coloring, actually, that'd be good. Okay. Bye, guys.